Okay, hello everyone and shalom. Always technical issues to remind us that we're not sitting in the same room as we should be, hopefully, but it's fantastic to be with all of you. Um, and we will continue this week with the Pirkei Avot. And if you've noticed, we're going down the line. In the introduction to Pirkei Avot, we spoke about the fact that there is a chronology. You see, Yair, now I don't now my English. Chronological lineage that we passed through in the Pirkei Avot, as it was passed down, and we spoke at the beginning of Pirkei Avot of this idea or the word that is used, which is umisarua, that it was passed down, the tradition was passed down, that it's not something written, it's not something you learn in the university. And when we talk about wisdom or knowledge, it's something which is passed from mother to son or daughter, from grandmother, and also through the rabbis to their students. And in that sense, there's actually a limitation when we start writing things down, because we lose the behind the scenes, the meaning. And I think some of what we're trying to do in these shiurim is to go back to the meaning and to find the meaning within the words and the ideas, both as those who wrote them and also what is the meaning for us today. Because Torah is always, whenever you learn Torah, again, it's not only a question of what does this mean, or what did this mean so long ago? It's what does it mean today. So today we're gonna if Rabbi Jair has found it, we're gonna open the Mishnah. Rabbi Jair, have you found it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
great. But continue talk before we show the Mishnah.
Okay, so we're going to deal with a fantastic Mishnah. I don't think we're going to get through more than one Mishnah today. Rabbi Jair and I were discussing that maybe we need a month for this one Mishnah, because there's so much that we can discuss. But the first thing that we will see in the Mishnah is the word Hillel. Hillel and they are the last of the couples of Pirkei Avot. If you have noticed in the last few weeks that we've been learning from couples who are learning with another. Another word for a couple is a chevruta, right? A learning partner. Again, it's not someone who learns a course in the university with you, but someone who's learning in depth, someone who you share your life with, that you grow with, and can have very different opinions of, which is an exact case of Hillel and Shammai. You can say that they are the classic examples of very close colleagues and friends who grew up, and learned together. But you see that from their perspective, they end up with very different opinions. Even if you have the same core halakha, then how is it translated? And then you end up even with a different practice about how to approach life and how to approach framework versus what is within that framework. For example, am I more lenient? Am I more strict? Or do I try to create just a path of truth that everyone sticks to, or something which is more open that everyone can feel a part of? These are some of the basic, that you can say, a tug war between Hillel and Shammai throughout their entire lives, and follows down to their students as well. So again, we can discuss this at length, but just talking about Hillel is he's a fascinating character, where he comes from. When we talk also about, looking at who is the one who's transferring knowledge and who is the one who's able to access knowledge. And one of the things we take for granted today is literacy, that we all can read, for example. But it used to be that the privileged would be able to read. So only a few hundred years ago, the people who possessed the knowledge, which is obviously power, were also the people who were able to teach their children at a young age. So the question of literacy is also, which comes into effect. And Hillel is a prime example of someone who did not come from the elite and built his way up and till he reached the top. Yair, maybe you want to give us a little bit of the background of Hillel.
I would say,
go forward.
Yes, Hillel is known as Hillel HaZaken, the old Hillel. Now he wasn't born old. as far as we know. But because also other Hillels came later, so it became Hillel Zaken, the old Hillel, which is of course even in that word something to learn, that the elderly, it's not something to be ashamed of or try to avoid. The opposite. It's the biggest compliment to tell someone you are old. It means you're wise and respectful. It doesn't mean that now you're not relevant anymore. And so Hillel Zaken, it's not clear exactly when he was born. We talk more or less on the 100 years before our count today, as we say BC, before count, right? That's what BC stands for, and which is relevant in many aspects. Many times when I talk about Hillel, for example, I think everyone in the north will know the Golden Rule, but the Golden Rule relies directly on a story. The Golden Rule in Christianity lies directly on Hillel's very famous rule of that he said the whole Torah is on one foot, is that you shouldn't do to your fellow what you hate is being done to you. And he lived just before the time of Jesus and his disciples. So that's relevant in our area. He grew up in Babylon. He was a Bavli. He didn't grow up in Israel. And in that sense, there are many different stories about the way he came to the studying. Many of the stories, I won't go through all these stories. Many of the stories contradict each other. So saying that exactly how he came, it's not 100% sure, but there are many great stories that were created on him. It's very relevant to talk about the fact that he came from Babylon, because he comes from a different school, a different way of understanding Judaism than the one that Shammai came from. He led Shammai as a partner. Shammai was a traditional one who came and said, you have to, the reasoning behind everything you say should be because this is what I learned from my rabbis. While Hillel said the reasoning should be debating, as we know from the Talmud way of studying. So he's the first one to bring this aspect of debating and studying and arguing for. There's a beautiful story on how he was appointed as a leader. That they invited him, and because he needed to answer about a question. And when he said what he said, they said, but how do you know so? And he started to say, to bring a proof from the one place, and then another proof, and he brings so many proofs, and they disagree. And then at the end he said, and this is what I learned from my rabbi. Said, oh, amazing, what a great rabbi you are. Now you can be our leader. Because they were more interested in that he continued the traditions as they are, and not to be a very clever one who can prove that what he says is right. They needed to know he's connected to the tradition. That's very, very short. Like, I covered one of the greatest people of the rabbi, really the ones who put the fundamentals of the Mishnah studies. It's very clear that Hillel and Shammai are the ones to start the Judaism as we know it. Before that, we have people who have few discussions and such. Hillel and Shammai starts all the debate aspects that we know, and they debate. They have hundreds of disagreements in the Mishnah. The rabbis before them don't have any. Like it's really all and they are the ones who come through so many Mishnayot about Hillel's opinion, Shammai's opinions, Bet Hillel opinion, and Bet Shammai, which is their disciples, their schools of learning that continued after them. So this is like the start of Hillel. You can read much more, but this is for now. I don't know if you want to add something from your angle of Moshe David. Moshe David, do you want to add anything of Hillel that I didn't say?
Yeah, I think something, just to give the background, is that he was a poor person. He grew up poor, didn't have any means. And the very famous story that you can look up is how he didn't have the money to pay. In other words, there was an admission fee to the Beit Midrash before Hillel's time. And as you see from the Nordic Beit Midrash, we have no admission fee, so we're following Hillel's path. But beforehand, there was an admission fee. And he didn't have the money to pay. He had such a yearning for the learning of Torah that he ended up, it was snowing, and he climbs up on the roof and he's listening through the window in the roof to the learning, and he's so engaged he ends up freezing. And
if you want to,
in the Beit Midrash,
yeah, they can try to do it now, maybe, Moshe David. Right now it's freezing cold here in the Nordics, including Denmark. So we can. I suggest everyone take their computer and go sit outside to study like Hillel did.
yes, so maybe it's a Nordic story in that sense, but so the people see that it's getting dark, and they don't understand why until they see that there's a shadow, and they thought at first that it was the snow, and then they see that it's the shape of a person in the snow in the window on the roof, and they go and they find a frozen person listening to the Torah, and they warm him, and from that point on they realized that there was a problem with this admission system, that someone who was too poor couldn't actually access the learning. And I think that in itself made a huge change. You're talking about learning and everything about Judaism. There's such a change in that, that it's not for the elite. It's something that we can first of all learn from everyone, and also that it must be accessible to everyone. So I think that is another thing that we can add just before we go into the Mishnah. We're not going to talk about Shammai today, about his colleague. One thing, though, that I did want to add was that Shammai was, without discussing it in depth, so as we said, Hillel was much, I wouldn't say lenient, but more open to the fact that the path should be inclusive to everyone and let people reach that path. Whereas Shammai was a representative of the truth. This is how it is, and if you don't fit, then you don't have a place. And they were striving for more demanding and strict, and we see that in different halachot regarding Shabbat, for example, and in many cases between Hillel and Shammai. Mentioning that, it's not surprising, without getting into Israeli politics, but it's interesting to note that the students of Shammai were extremely active in the revolt against the Romans, because it fit that personality. And they ended up, that entire camp of Shammai, of Beit Shammai, were almost completely wiped out by the Romans in the revolt from the year 67 onwards till the destruction of the temple, so that we actually don't have many of them. And the Talmud as we have it today is based on the school of thought of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who comes from the school of Hillel. So in that sense, I think on the one hand, that history is important to note, but also the fact that those who created the Talmud always mentioned Hillel, Shammai, even though it would have been very easy for them to just say, okay, well, they're no longer here. But the truth is that not only expressing your own opinion, but expressing the opposite opinion is what brings truth in. And I think that's a good introduction to the Mishnah that we will see. Yair, you can take over. I'm going to try to log in again from a different computer, so it's easier for me to begin the Mishnah.
Yeah, I will add one thing while he does it, that Hillel HaZaken is also the closest thing we have to royalty in Jewish tradition. First of all, he was, according to tradition, a descendant of King David, of the house of the king of David HaMelech, and his children in 15 generations were the president of Sanhedrin. You'll know names as Rabban Gamliel and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi, the one who collected the Mishnah, and all his children. So he also started how do you call it? Shoshelet, like a dynasty of leaders of the Jewish people until the last one, until Rabban Gamliel Shishi, until the year 425, as it starts from his period. So he's also in that sense starts a kind of a royal dynasty, but just not royal. They were the rabbis. Good. So now we'll start reading the Mishnah, and we can see here. The Mishnah was taken from us because of Moshe David took over. I think right now I can't share. It's automatically. I can read it to you if you want. Oh, now I'm a host again. Good. So now I can share again. Sorry. Here. It says, Hillel v'Shammai kiblu mehem. Hillel and Shammai received the oral tradition from them. From them is, of course, Shemaya v'Avtalion, the one we learned about before. So, Hillel and Shammai received from them. Hillel used to say, be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind and drawing them close to the Torah. I will already say that before we go to the details, I have to adjust some of the words, but the most important one is the word loving mankind. That's not what it says. It says ohevet habriot. Ohevet habriot means love the creatures. Habriot, the one who were created. It comes from the word bria. So the one who were created and drawing them close to the Torah. Moshe David, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you, but very strange things are happening today. I got the computer to work and now the video is not working. So you'll have to take it like this.
It's fine.
It's easier for me. Now I can see all of you and it's really nice to see you.
Now it's really oral Torah without even seeing
yes.
it, only the words.
You can imagine my face. Yeah, look, this is the video. Okay. So Hillel says to be the disciple.
Yeah,
you shall be.
You shall be.
You shall be of the disciples of Aaron. Again, I think it's, if we even just begin from here, let's go back to who Aaron was and his relationship also to Moses, because we know that we have two types of leaders in Moses and in Aaron. The first time that we meet Aaron was when he's an interpreter, right? That's the first time he becomes a leader, when he's an interpreter for Moses, because Moshe has a tied tongue, as they say, or he has difficulty speaking. So we know that we have these two brothers, and we know that Moshe is the one who goes up to Sinai. The Moshe is the one who talks to Hashem and brings down the Torah. So what does Aaron actually do? And I think one of the
I think it's weird for us. We already read how much the Torah is important, right? Until now, we talked about the giving the how you should give the Torah from generation to generation, give the tradition, the oral Torah, the studies, the learning, and we know that it starts from Moshe. I think coming to this sentence, we are supposed to be completely surprised, because until now we learned Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. So when we are supposed to be disciples, we are supposed to be disciples of Moshe. And it's a great surprise saying, no, you should be disciples of Aaron.
And I think it's even more surprising, I would add, when we think of the story, especially of the golden calf. If you remember the story, then Moshe goes up to heaven and he disappears. And everyone is waiting for him to come down, and they get nervous. They think that they've lost their leader. You know, someone who goes up and doesn't come down. It hasn't happened before in history. So who says he's going to even come down at all? And they and the one who's leading them at the time is Moshe's brother, is Aaron. And Aaron says to them, you know, bring me your golden earrings and your nose rings and everything that you have. And they go and do that. And what many times we forget in the story is that actually Aaron is the one who is leading them in with the golden calf, and he's the one who throws it in the fire. So you can ask yourself, well, if you have done idol worship, then how can you still be a leader? And Moshe, when he comes down from the mountain, he turns to Aaron, and this is in the Torah, you can read the portion, and it says that he is very angry with him, and he says, how could you do such a thing? And Aaron's answer is basically saying, I was with them. And I think it's an amazing sentence when we and again, thinking about Hillel and Shammai, it actually goes back to Moshe and Aaron. I would say there's two different types of leadership. One is the leadership of taking people forward, and the other is to be there for the people. And there's two, and Moshe actually lost the people by going up too far into heaven. You can have the perfect Torah in heaven. You can have the angels who, you know, and Moshe was like an angel. He didn't eat or drink for 40 days, 40 nights, but he had lost touch with the people. And Aaron was the one who always made sure that they were in touch. And, you know, if someone, you know, it's always so easy to have or to be there for the perfect people, for the greatest students, but who is there for the ones who are not so perfect? Aaron's job, what was his job? His job was to sit at the entrance of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, and to receive the offerings of the people. And many times we think about the offerings the daily offerings, but there were also sin offerings. And in order to give a sin offering, you would have to confess and say, this is what I have done. So the meeting with the Kohen, with the priest, with Aaron was essential, because if you have someone if Moshe were to meet the people there, they would probably turn around and run back home ashamed of themselves. They wouldn't even step into the temple because they would say, we have done wrong. Aaron is the bridge to be there for the person and allow them their own self-reflection through the fact that they are loved. And that is why the key word here is love as well. Because it doesn't mean that love doesn't mean that you are right in what you did wrong. Love means that I know that in the depth of your heart, you didn't want to do wrong. And I think that to speak about Aaron and Moshe, I think that is the essence of what Aaron was. Someone who was able to look at you and see you, and just by meeting that person or meeting Aaron, you already wanted to be a better person. You already wanted to change yourself, not because someone told you to do so. That was Moshe's job, but and we say in Kabbalat Shabbat every week, Moshe ve'Aaron, that we actually need the balance of the two of them. We need someone to pull us forward, but we also need someone to be there to love us and to hug us.
Yeah, there are, I would add two things that are famous from the Torah about Aaron. The one is when they die. It is a very famous difference between the description when Moshe dies and when Aaron dies. It says when Moshe dies, it says that that the Israelites wept. ויבכו בני ישראל. And when Aaron dies, it says, ויבכו אותו כל בני ישראל. All of בני ישראל. The word kol It means everyone. The Israelites cried, but all of the Israelites cried when Aaron died, not when Moshe died. And that's a very sensitive way that the Talmud, the Rabbi, already the Midrashim could hear that difference and say Aaron was closer to the people and was loved by the people in a different way. And you could say it's a problem, right? Being populistic, maybe he was listening too much, being able to do also bad thing that as you mentioned, maybe connected to what he did with the Egel HaZahav, with the golden calf. But Aaron was connected to them. And I can give also the other example, which I think relates to what we started to talk about here, that they also have a very famous dialogue while right after Aaron's two sons die, in the Pasha, in the book of Vayikra. We won't open the whole story because that story demands many shiurim for themselves. But in the heart there, Moshe tells Aaron, you have to step up because you have a role to the Jewish people. Even though you just lost your two sons, you have a role in the holiest of holiest. Then you can't mourn. You have to do your obligations. And then many people stop there and saying, "Wow, that's an amazing thing. How we need to learn from Aaron that he accepted the ruling of Moshe." But actually, when you go to the end of the chapter, the two other sons make a mistake and they don't eat of the meat that they were supposed to eat. And Moshe is furious with them. Say, wow, you have to do everything as the Torah says. And then comes Aaron to him and says, but Moshe, do you really think this is good in God's eyes, that we will sit and eat of the offerings after all what happened today? Do you really think this is what God wants? And I think in that sense, they have a debate about what the Torah is. Moshe comes and say, we have the law and we have to follow it, regardless what happens. And Aaron says, yes, we have the law, we have the Torah. But the question is what God wants. Not what he wants the essence of the law, the essence of why we got the Torah, the values, the shalom, and the place how the Torah comes in our life, and not how we only bound ourselves to the rooting of the Torah, but understanding what God wants from us, which sometimes will mean also going maybe a bit aside of the Torah, understanding that you need to find a way that the Torah will fit to the situation where people, how people live, how people are. And this is what he says, I'm now mourning my two sons. Do you really think God wants me to be as if nothing happened? This is not what God wants. He doesn't want me to celebrate him in the temple when I just lost my two sons. And Moshe accepts it. And Moshe says, he accepts to what Aaron says. So Aaron is also in that way persuasive. He managed to take Moshe with him to understanding this situation. And I think that fits very well to the figure of Hillel in general. Hillel, the one who's tried to find solutions to problems that the Torah comes when it meets reality. This is part of the figure of Hillel, just like Aaron did it before.
I think jumping from Aaron to Hillel, so the famous story that we have of Hillel with the convert, or the person who comes to him to convert, and in a truthful way, the famous story is that he comes and he says there are different stories, a few different stories or versions that are given in the Talmud, but the famous one is that someone comes and he says, I would like to convert to Judaism while standing on one foot. So normal person would say, you know, what a chutzpah. What do you think? Are you belittling God like that to say that that is what it is worth, that I can teach it to you in 5 minutes? Whereas Hillel, so Shammai actually sends him away. He says, you know, you have something to learn about about humility before you come back to me. Go and learn about that and come back. Whereas Hillel says he wants to see in depth what is it that brings this person forward, and then he gives him this one sentence, and that in other words, putting it all into this issue of love and not doing to one, like Rabbi Jair mentioned before, and the basic principle of love as the essence of the Torah, which was not, maybe it was forgotten a bit, and maybe people were too you know, running after the truth that they were forgetting the people surrounding them. So following up on that, I think, so if we look, it says you should be of the disciples of Aaron. That's saying to each and every one of us that we should choose this path of listening and a path of receiving before we teach. We say every morning in the tefillah before Shema, we say lishmoa, lilmod, ulilamed. We say that there's three stages. One should listen, and then one should learn, and then one should teach. In other words, before you come to teach, the first thing that you should do is listen to someone and what they have to teach you, but also just to listen to where they are. Many times we already have in our minds what we're going to say, and we forget to listen to the person standing in front of us. And I think both Aaron and Hillel were really good listeners. They were listening and attentive. And jumping back to Aaron and the temple and the Beit HaMikdash, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, Aaron was the first high priest. The high priest on Yom Kippur, he was supposed to atone for the whole nation. So if we were to count up all of our different sins just in this one virtual room, I think it would be difficult to atone for everything. How does one person atone for everything? And what the Torah teaches us about the high priest, that there's actually a condition to him atoning. For him to atone, first of all, it says, V'chiper ba'ado, uve'ad beito, uve'ad kol kahal Yisrael, that he would atone for himself, for his house, for his household, and for the rest of Am Yisrael. In other words, when I go out, and we can talk about this soon, about the idea of shalom, but if I go out and I think I'm going to atone for the whole world, and I don't first think and reflect for myself what I need to reflect upon, then I'll end up being fake. But if I only reflect upon myself, then I can forget everyone else. The Gemara, the Talmud teaches us in the beginning of Yoma, which discusses Yom Kippur, that the Kohen has to have a household. He must have a home to atone for in order to atone for everyone else. Because again, this is talking, Rabbi Jair mentioned about Christianity before, but the whole idea in Judaism is that it begins with the home, and it begins with the relationship between man and wife. And only once you figure that out, then you can go and figure the rest out. There was a famous rabbi who said, when I was young, I thought I would fix the world, and then I thought I would fix my hometown. And now as I'm old, I wish I could fix myself. So in that sense, that we really want to go and use our home as a basis for understanding, and that's the deepest gift that we have. The opposites also that we have within the home, which is, I think, we can go into now. The word shalom, Rabbi, I once heard.
Yeah, that's going from the Kohanim. I always afraid when you talk about Kohanim, because you have to be careful not to praise yourself too much as a Kohen. It should be me saying how the Kohanim was amazing to do that, not you. But
I do have to tell you that a reflection as a Kohen, that maybe even as a rabbi, I'm not sure you have. There's a special halacha for Kohanim. You have the special blessing of the Kohanim that they bless the nation. And the halacha is that the Kohen, it's a birkat shalom, right? That you bless the nation with peace. And this is actually done every single day in the Holy Land. And when you're far away in the diaspora, then this is only done on the high holidays and on the three, right, Yamim Tovim, and the festivals. So, but there's different customs about this, as there is about everything. But this blessing is very special because you're using the biblical passages of blessing the people with peace, with shalom, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But Birkat Shalom, there's a special halacha that a Kohen cannot give this blessing if he's unsure that everyone in the room does not love him. In other words, if you've had a fight or someone out there that you think doesn't like you right now, you can't give this blessing. And vice versa as well, right? That the Kohen, if he thinks that there's anyone in the room that he does not like, he cannot give the bracha either. So I know that you know that halakha, Rabbi Jair, but I'm saying the reflection of that is quite deep. To walk into a Beit Knesset is a Beit of Shalom, right? A synagogue is a house of peace. And to realize that whatever you might, differences of opinion that you might have, there's something that must be there that connects you deeper than that.
I never thought of the connection here, as you said, from Aaron, a Kohen that is supposed to seek peace. This is actually the role of every Kohen. That without peace they can't bless. They can't do their role. They have to have peace. It's I never thought about it in this in this choice of being one of Aaron's disciples. The ones who can't do their role if they don't have peace.
I think, and we'll still, I think, go back to the home, because one of my rabbis once said that there's no word that is abused more than the word peace.
I think only the word love.
Maybe the word love and peace, yes, because the word when we talk about peace or peace accords or peace resolutions, what we mean today is that basically, imagine tomorrow morning, God willing, we will have peace between the Ukraine and Russia, or between Russia and the Ukraine. So what is that essence of peace? So everyone is going to be happy. They're going to go and sign a peace treaty. It means that I won't shoot you as long as I'm not strong enough to do so. And I have someone, on my, I'm strong enough on the other side to keep me from doing so. That's what we mean by peace. I'm going to cut the Holy Land into pieces, and then I'm going to call it peace. Whereas, why do I say it's an abuse? Because it's almost the opposite of the word shalom. Shalom is actually one of God's names, right? Which means that you cannot cut God into pieces because God is one and only. So what does shalom mean? Shalom actually means that I'm bringing the opposites together, and in doing so, bringing something beautiful between them. So that's what it says about shalom between a man. We actually use the word shalom very carefully about very specific things. And we say shalom bayit, for example, to have peace in the home. So this can follow the example that we just said. I go to a marriage counselor and I figure out how not to yell at my wife for the next 2 hours. And I feel that we're really at peace, right? So is that peace? Or is there something beautiful in the fact that I learn to appreciate the differences between us? And this is a life's work, of course, but to appreciate the differences in the fact that there's actually something beautiful that resonates. And at the end of the day, our children are a product of those opposites coming together. Our children the essence of children is shalom. The essence of children is peace because they come as a product of that shalom, bringing together two opposites.
But Moshe David, I have to challenge you on this, because I'm not sure the word shalom. When we read the word shalom in the Bible, I can kind of think of a few examples. The word shalom means no one is harassing you right now. It's not the harmony and like all the metaphors that we bring into the amazing great word, like the the highest level of shalom that we talk about today. Many times shalom is like it's shchavtem ven macharid. That right now there's no sword coming within your land. That peace means, the word shalom means everything is calm. It's not like there's no, but it's not necessarily the word shalom always being like so high. I know, for example, when we talk about a good example, you talked about peace prize. If we know one thing, that when two sides sign a peace treaty, it doesn't mean that they have good relations. The peace, that the shalom, that I would say that the good relations we have in Scandinavia is because we don't need the treaties anymore. In the time that we needed treaties, until not that long ago in Scandinavia, in the time we needed to have peace accords and having wars and then new agreements and the settling and then it means we have lots of problems. There's something about shalom that when you that it's only about making sure that right now no one gets hurt. It's like setting in the Muslim world, shalom, salam is considered lower than salah, sulha. Sulha is the complete, now we are back, we are two different tribes that now we will, after we had a long conflict. Shalom is like, it's closer to a ceasefire. What do you think about it?
I think that you forget if we talk about how it's been used, and maybe even the Torah understands that it won't be at the highest level, but don't forget that the word shalom comes from shalem, from whole. And the word shalem means, it's either whole or it's not whole. It's either one or the other. And the letters for shalom are shin, lamid, vav, and mem. The shalem is shin, lamid, mem, is the being complete, being whole. And the vav is a connecting letter. In other words, shalom means I'm connecting to the wholeness through my action. And again, I think it's something that it doesn't mean peace and love without challenges. That I agree with you. In other words, the idea that I have shalom in my house and I will have it for the next 20 years is a fake notion, because it's something that I have to work on constantly in order to make it more beautiful. There's no home that doesn't have such a challenge. So there's no country that doesn't have such a challenge. And I would say that a country that has not had any challenges regarding shalom will end up having problems interacting with others. And I think we can see that in some countries that have not had war for 250 years, because it's actually interaction brings about shalom. Learning to get to know the opposite and learn from the opposite doesn't mean I agree, but it brings something beautiful between if I'm open up to receive it. But if we continue even one word in the Mishna,
I want to continue a second in that sense, because I think if we take the lower aspect of shalom, not the ones that come to a whole, then we can actually see an interesting way maybe of insisting on compromise. That when you insist on ohev shalom, you want to make sure no one gets harmed. It means you don't insist on the value or what you think. You don't insist on justice. Shalom, haemet v'shalom Avot, like the two converts. In many ways, shalom comes. It doesn't fit with truth and with justice, because to seek for shalom, it means you need to do compromise. I would say, if you want to make sure no one gets hurt, maybe Aaron, who needed to go make compromises, did the same thing. He said, I understand that, no, I insist on not paying the price of the great values, because shalom means people will get safe. many times we have people who think that we have to, people have to suffer in order to come to the better world we are trying to create. This is a necessity, that there is a price to be paid, and people should pay that price either in order to see that they are wrong, or because this is what we need to build on to. And I think Aaron insists on the people, and that no one should pay the price. That he says the shalom is something that is not in the ideal level. I love shalom because I love the situation that right now no one gets hurt, even though I won't come to the ideal place I want to. I'm willing to pay that price because there is something that is more important. Maybe that's why, if we'll come to the last words, he decides to say mekarvan la Torah, drawing them close to Torah, and giving them the Torah, or forcing them the Torah, or teaching them the Torah. Just takes them closer, because he's the one who will say.
Actually, yeah, I'm glad that I can finally disagree with you. I think that if you're compromising about anything, then you're not living your truth. But the question is, what is your truth? And as Rabbi Nachman of Breslau puts it, what is the truth of the truth? In other words, sometimes what I think is the truth is something which is a value that I'm standing up for, but I'm not looking deeper into it to see what is beyond. I agree with you that the ultimate goal is to have shalom, but in that, I actually don't have to compromise if I reach a deeper level, which is beyond the value system that I have right now. So I don't think it's actually compromised in any sense.
But it is a compromise. How can you say that? When the other hurt you, killed someone, or the other, let's say, a different people that did act against me. When you do shalom with them, you compromise on justice, on the just idea of someone who did wrong should pay the price. You compromise.
If you realize, for example, that by what you're doing, you're allowing the person to amend and fix themselves, and in that you will make the world a better place, then what is better justice than that? I mean, you can take it simple.
The opposite. They learn not to pay the price, and they will have a shalom. I think it really fits.
I agree with you. I agree with you that the courts today are not at the level of Aaron to be doing that. In other words, and in that case, you should follow truth. You should follow the truth and justice if you're not able to reach a deeper level. But if we take a simple example, I mean, if someone, a child is late to class, okay? So the justice is to say, I've already made a class rule that if anyone who's late tomorrow for more than 2 minutes will leave the class. Okay, but then as a teacher, if you don't realize the story of this kid, and that for this kid, whatever circumstances was, the fact that they're only 2 minutes late means that that all they need right now is because their home is falling apart and they have nothing to, or whatever the story is. And if you were to send them out of the classroom, even though you set that rule, you are a cruel person, because knowing the circumstances is important. If you see someone,
you don't have circumstances.
There's always circumstances. If you don't have circumstances, then you haven't met the person. In other words, that's the whole idea of Aaron, is that you have to know and meet a person before he walks into the temple. Because if you don't, then I would set a rule for the judges of the court, which is opposite of what is today, that the judges should spend at least a day with a murderer before they they put them on trial. Because once it doesn't mean that it's changing your verdict. It means that you are understanding the person. And also when you talk about justice, justice for who? Justice for the victim, justice for the perpetrator, difficult questions. But when we look at this idea of being a Talmid of Aaron, means the first thing that you should do And we can go back to the classic example of the Midrash that tells us what was Aaron doing, that if he saw two people that were, a couple that were fighting, let's call her, Leah and Sarah, Leah and David, okay? So he meets Leah and he sees from, that they're fighting. He hears that they're in a great fight. So he would go over to Leah and he would say to her, I met David this morning at the synagogue. He's so heartbroken that you're not having such a good time. And he just can't get himself around to saying it, but he just wanted, he really wants to tell you how heartbroken it is. The truth is that David that morning was telling Aaron how much he hates his wife. He can't stand her and he wants to get rid of her. So Aaron would go and he would say this to the wife. And then he would go back to the husband and he'd say, I just met your wife crying outside. She's so brokenhearted that you're in this situation, but she can't come to say it to you. And then the next time that Leah and David met, they immediately hugged and loved one another again, because that was the truth of the truth. It wasn't the truth.
Now, this is a beautiful story of the Gemara. You're right. But what happened the second after, when they said, thank you so much for the thing you said, it meant so much for me, and they found out that I also grew up in that story of Avot.
So if you believe in the story, then you also believe that the moment that they get back together and through Aaron are able to touch one another at that deeper level, then as effect of that, they will refine the love that was actually existing there. Because what was stopping them is their own ego. But if you're able to get beyond that and go back to that level of shalom in a true sense, then it's not a compromise. I think it's exactly what the point is here.
But I want to insist on, I really think, and it's great to have disagreement in this comparison. I would insist that Aaron says, shalom is so important that people shouldn't be hurt, that I insist on willing to compromise. It means, for example, insisting on even building a egel zahav, a golden calf, that makes sure that the people won't start a leadership fight. There are actually stories about how the people killed Kalev, who also stayed there to lead them. So maybe to avoid bloodshed, you are allowed to do terrible, terrible things. Like something that is close to idol worshiping, the discussion what exactly is in the golden calf. But it's when he comes and say, Ohev shalom v'rodef shalom, it means you want people not to get hurt, even though you won't get the great goal that you can have. And I would argue that's why Aaron and Moshe were two of a completion. Moshe was a person of truth. Moshe was a person of justice. We know that from many other places. And when Aaron and Moshe are together, they complete each other. Because Aaron will come and say, he brings Moshe down to earth to saving people. This is Aaron's saving every person, if they deserve it or not, every person. So maybe shalom in the lower sense is something very deep that we should remember. I think I need to learn this lesson. When I insist on having and say, okay, some of the people won't be happy, that the lesson of compromise on your ideals and thing you really believe on for the sake of shalom. That's something I think that is something that I need to work with. I don't think compromise is a bad thing. The opposite. I say this is what he teaches us.
I think the danger when you look at again, to go back to this notion of peace and love that that we've been that has been around for a few decades now, in terms of let's just all love each other. In other words, if you can only love each other when you're not yourself and you're not standing up for what you believe in, then that is fake love. I think when you talk about compromise, then you can stop being who you are. A deeper level is to be who you are, and through being strong in what you are, you're able to have a big enough heart and strong enough that you don't have to be defensive toward the fact that someone else thinks differently than you. And in that sense, if I have something deep which connects me, but I also can stand strong and the person across from me can appreciate what I feel strongly about, then it's not about a compromise. It's something which is a deep agreement, which was not possible before. I mean, just take the most explosive example. We can have a huge debate about this, but take the most explosive example of the Temple Mount. I think the problem there, or Al-Aqsa, the problem is that people feel that they own it. And they have to, in order to show their respect for God, on either side, they have to show that they own it and they're willing to go for war for it. What is missing there is a message that, first of all, I appreciate that it is a holy place for you and for me. Secondly, I respect the fact that you have respect for this place. And I respect the fact that it is sacred to you and I wouldn't want to touch that. And then through that, maybe it's not reaching a compromise, but using something, maybe something utopian, which is to find something in which both traditions can be respected in the same space, where the only possible solution now is complete war at a global warfare.
I think this is a great example. For example, I just had here. I'll show you how much I'm not a student of Hillel and of Aaron. I just had an argument with my father about that, and many times we have discussion about the situation in Israel, Palestine, Temple Mount, and many times they come and say, maybe we just need everything to explode because we only delay. Every time we buy another few years of peace, another sometime, but we only delay the explosion. Maybe we need things to explode, and then we can find the solution. And some people will pay the price. And my father always comes and say, but think of how many people will pay the price. And you can say maybe we only delayed 10 years, but that means that we're 10 years that many people didn't pay the price. And you don't know what will happen in 10 years. So I think this is a great lesson that Aaron teaches me. I think I need to learn that. Remember that delay in the sake of peace and finding out that right now, at least, no one is harmed. And then hopefully we will continue seek that peace, and someone in 5-10 years will also do the same. There's something great about that. Not only saying, oh, they just delayed the conflict in a few years. No, that means people stayed safe another period of time. That's amazing.
I think if you read the prophets, then you will see that they have a higher idea, hopes and visions and dreams of actually having that level that I'm describing. But you see that I'm uncompromising in this debate as well. But if we finish the Mishnah, because our time is already run out, then I think something important at the end of the Mishnah is, first of all, something very simple, which is not so simple, that all of this comes through loving the creatures. And as you mentioned, it's the creatures. In other words, God's creatures. It goes back to the fact that we have something which brings us all together and something which is deeper than the conflicts and divisions that we have.
No, but and then the final... would add, Moshe David, they have to add, many people talked about the biggest problem of, for example, communism, who loved humanity but not humans. That like talked about the mankind but not people. And Aaron here says ohevet habriot, love humans, not humanity, not like but the individuals that are that creates that mankind, not the mankind as something vague that describe everyone. No, all the individual, the briot. Yeah.
And just to find the final words of the Mishnah, umikarvan Torah, and it brings them close to the Torah. And I think it's important to when we look at these words, which is, in other words, I see the final word here as a total effect of following this Mishnah. If you are a disciple of Aaron, you love peace and you pursue it, and it's in your mind all of the time, and you love every single person that you meet, the effect will be that people will come closer to Hashem and the Torah through that. If you feel that this is a directive, this is the end of the Mishnah tells me that I must bring people close to the Torah, then you're following Moshe, you're not following Aharon. You're following the rules and the guidelines, but you're not following this is more about an inner motion that through this you bring people closer to the Torah, through being non-judgmental, through looking for the truth of the truth and not only the truth and nothing but the truth, looking for something deeper. I think people are very sensitive and can feel that in your interaction with them. When you meet someone, you can realize, is this person really, is this missionary work? Are they trying to bring me in? Are they trying to draw me into something? Or is it something that they love so much and they love me so much that how could I not share it with you? If the Torah is for you like a chocolate bar, like the best, chocolate bar, we won't get into the best one in the Nordic countries. We can have a competition sometime about what people think is the best. But if we were to take, a chocolate bar, something that I really love, I want to share with someone that I love. So if I love the Torah, it's something that I want to share with others, and I think it follows the entire Mishnah that we have seen. But we hear that there's different ways of approaching Shalom itself, but at the end of the day, it's a vision that we have, that we want to have a place of peace from our own personal lives to those who we meet, to our homes. My rabbi of blessed memory, Rabbi Menachem Shulman, who was someone very engaged in peace work, if we call it that, in religious peace work. He's constantly said to us, don't you dare even speak about anything or do anything if you don't first have it at your own home. Because our home teaches us to what shalom means and what shalom means not. And in that sense, going from the home out for ourselves first, to look in the mirror, to caring for our loved ones at home, and from there to go out and not to reach this, I'm going to have, I just love everyone. Sometimes you meet these people who just love everyone, but you wonder whether they love themselves and whether they love those surrounding them as well. It's difficult and very difficult work to, again, as you said, Rav Yair, the word love and peace can be very abused and misused.
I would say amen to that.
So it's been, you see, with all of the technical details, so you got the oral law from me, but I am here behind the screen. Everything crashed on me today on this new computer. So thank you, Rav Yair. One last thing for today is that every one of you this Mishnah is talking to each and every one of you. This is not a Mishnah for the rabbis. It's not a Mishnah for for those who have learned their entire lives. This is something simple, but not simple, that we must think about and think of how we follow in every single interaction that we have in our lives, from the supermarket to the bus driver to our wives, to our offices, to our businesses, and to the synagogue, to our communities. And if we take it from that level, and that ripple will slowly spread, and we'll be able to bring a real sense of shalom at the highest levels. So thank you, Rav Yair. Thank all of you for joining us tonight.
Chanukah Sameach to everyone.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Chanukah Sameach, and we go from one light to another, building up, and we didn't realize, when we look at the final day, we couldn't have imagined that the first day we had so much light in us. We don't have to be scared of sharing the light that we have with others, is one of the deep messages of Chanukah. And we'll see each other next week during Chanukah. So shalom and להתראות. לילה טוב.
להתראות.
שמחה חנוכה.
חג שמח.
חג שמח.
חג שמח.
להתראות.